We're going to be talking all about objection handling today. So objection handling in your real estate business. I've got a process that I use and that I think, I've heard this, I forget where I heard it from, but I wrote it down. It's been in my notes. I go back to it. And at this point now, it's kind of embedded in my brain. But we're going to talk about a process to use. We're going to talk about even, objections and how to even think about them, because sometimes we get what we think is an objection. It might not even be an objection, and how to handle that, or how to even look at that and approach it. And then we're going to go into some actual specific objections, the ones that we get most common as real estate agents. I've got about 5 of them listed out that I think we all hear. Anybody that's been in real estate for long enough, you've heard it. And we're going to talk about, some ways that I go, and answer them. And, and I'd love to hear from other agents about how they handle them. Right. And then if we've got time, of course, at the end, we can, get into more, if other people are hearing common objections, we can maybe start discussing that and kind of going through those as well. So awesome, guys. Well, looks like we're live. I just want to confirm we are live on Facebook. Yes, we are. Good deal. All right. So we are streaming live on Facebook. Oh, Sylvia, you're watching on Facebook. All right. You still get a shout out. What's up? And then we got Zoom right here, guys. So, all right. Well, we can get started. Z squared, Dan Zabita. Hey, oh, there you go, Dan. Good to see you. All right. Well, guys, let's get rocking and rolling. So today, talking all about objection handling. I'm so excited to be sharing this with you guys. I think, the reason why I wanted to talk about objection handling today is it's I would actually say that this skill and just communication in general is the reason why, most real estate agents don't succeed in this business. I heard a statistic that 85% of people that join the business, that get into real estate, we all know that it's usually not your first career. Most people don't, go to college and say, I'm going to be a real estate agent. Usually you fall into this business from something else that you've been doing. And 85% of those people that get into real estate do so without having any prior sales experience. Or maybe they did, but it was a long time ago or something like that, right? But they don't have any prior sales experience, meaningful prior sales experience. So that's 85%, which if you look at it, there's an 87% failure rate in real estate, right? Like that's just a fact. We all know that about 13% of agents actually make it long-term in this business. The other ones, end up falling out, or, they just continue on as part-time and, maybe sell a house or two a year. But the ones that actually make it as their full-time business, it's about 13%. So if you look at that correlation, we talk about sales skills and how that lines up. I mean, one of the biggest things that I would say that you learn as a salesperson is how to communicate and how to, of course, overcome objections. And so, I mean, this is an important skill to know. I truly believe that if we as real estate agents knew what to say all the time, then of course we would talk to more people all the time, right? Which is, of course, one of the biggest things you can do in your business is constantly be out there talking, being on the phone, whatever it might be. But I think there's a disconnect sometimes with knowing what to say, and then people being afraid and not making that, effort to communicate more often. And then the same thing too, I think people are afraid of objections. They don't know, what to say. And so they don't put themselves in enough situations where they would get objections, right? Like that's maybe a confidence thing, right? Like not having the confidence to go in and, just put yourself in those situations and be willing to fail, be willing to make mistakes, and be willing to learn. And so then they just don't do it, or they don't do it to the level that they would need to do it to, make a real go at this. And so, one of the biggest things you can do is learn how to handle objections, learn how to communicate. Because I mean, we all know if you knew every objection and how to handle it perfectly, if you knew every single right word to say, you would have no problem going out there and talking and communicating with people and really growing a really big real estate business. So I think that's pretty safe to say. So, all right, so I've got some notes here. The first thing that I want to start with is just kind of talking about, the actual objections and are all objections worth handling, right? Because I'm going to give you a process, it's basically 6 steps. But the first thing to know is that whenever you get somebody that questions, something that you're doing or trying to sell to them or whatever, it might not always be an actual objection. Sometimes it can be a complaint, right? And a complaint might be like, man, the commissions are just so expensive, or like, man, that just seems like, such a low price, or, whatever it is, right? Like that doesn't necessarily mean right away you got to go into my 6-step process of, handling that objection, because that might be a little full blown. Some of the times, all you need to do if you hear something like that, if you really don't think it's necessarily going to be a hindrance to actually closing the deal or making the sale, all you might need to do is just, let them know that you heard them, that you acknowledge that you heard them, and then reassure them that that's just the way it is, right? Like there's no change in it. And if you just do that, I'd actually, a vast majority of the times when you get an objection, that's all that's necessary, right? And then you just move forward. You don't, dwell on it or make it bigger than it needs to be. You just got to acknowledge it, let them know you hear them, and then reassure them that that's just the way that it is, and then move on, right? So that's the first thing to kind of note. There also might be something that's a condition, right? Like that you can't, like it might be an objection, but it's actually something that like, there's no matter what you say is going to change it, right? Like it's a condition. So for instance, like if they just say like, hey, we can't move right now, right? Like, something changed, right? There's a condition, like we no longer can move, and it's not like a wish or hope or anything like that you can change. It's literally like, we, didn't get the job transfer after all, we're going to be staying here or whatever. Like, you're not going to try and overcome that. All I would say that you want to do is maybe ask more questions to get, full clarification on it. And again, I mean, if then eventually during that clarification, something comes up that you see that, it's an objection you might be able to handle, then you can go and try and, talk about that. But most of the time, it might just be now you need to come up with a different plan, right? So anyway, so those are, just some things to, to note first off before we go, full blown kind of talking about objection handling. So any questions there? First off, Curtis, I'm going to, see, are you still there to?
I'm here, man.
Okay,
You nailed it. Conditions, objections. Now I'm with you. The other one, it's not like necessarily a designated thing, but a lot of times as well, it's just ignorance, right? It's just lack of knowledge. So many times people just need education. It's not that they have an objection. It's just that they don't even know what the subject matter is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I will say too, guys, I mean, the thing about objections and handling objections, it's really like, if you got to kind of change your mindset. I think so many people are kind of nervous about objections, and, and they kind of tense up or something if they get an objection. I think that there's, something that comes with, of course, just experience where, not only do you know how to answer objections, but it's also the confidence part of it that like, you got to realize that with this business, the more confident you are in your abilities and in your business, the easier it is to handle kind of any situation that gets thrown at you. And so like what I mean by that is like, you got to realize too that, not like, nothing is is that important where you have to like convince something, or change somebody's mind on everything. Like they may have a good point, or whatever it might be, but you have to be so confident in what your offering is and your abilities that like, hey, if, after you educate them, like what Curtis said, like a lot of this is all, Curtis or is all education. Once you've educated them and you've like tried to explain in your best way possible that, that, hey, this is just the way it is, or this is how, you should look at it, and they still, don't get it, then, hey, that's okay too, right? Like but I think when you get so emotionally tied to like a particular transaction or a particular dealing, that like your objection handling abilities become compromised almost, because now it's like, you got all this emotion involved and tied up in it. And it's like, they can feel it, that person on the other end can kind of feel it. And, and it's almost sometimes desperation that comes out or whatever it is. And you don't want any of that, right? Like you just want to come off as like the person that, hey, like I'm the expert here. Like I'm trying to help you out. Like we're on the same side here, and I'm going to do my darnest to, to relay that to you. And then beyond that, that's all you can do. Right. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is just having that confidence, knowing that like, hey, no one thing is too big. Like, it's not going to break your business. It's not going to make or break your business. Right. You can always live to fight another day. So like, if you get objections, like, hey, just look at that like it's, one step closer to the sale. Like once you start getting like more excited about objections, because I mean, really, when people start making objections, it's almost like, they're explaining to you how to sell them, right? Because like you might have spoken for 30 minutes and not heard a word from them, and you didn't touch on a single thing that really would have stopped them or that would have made the sale. But now when they actually get their time to kind of like talk or say something, they're going to go right to the point, the things that are stopping them, from deciding on that decision, that outcome that you want. And so you got to look forward to that, right? And be excited that, hey, now I'm finally getting to it, but just be prepared, right? And just know kind of like what to say. So anyway, all right. So that's kind of, the mindset that you want to be in. You want to kind of change your mindset, be excited, not be, scared or nervous when that comes up. So really that's, I've got a 6-step process kind of written down here. And that's the first step, all right? It's get into the right state of mind. All right. You want to get excited. Basically, they want to do business with you. Like that's when they start giving you objections, you want to think in your mind, like they're giving me these objections because they want to do business with me. I just got to give them, the education. So that way they feel confident, just like I feel confident helping them. Right. So that's how you have to think about it. But yeah, you're one step closer to doing business, and you want to be strong in the face of objections, right? Like if you start to like, grimace or anything like that, or like, you look down or you become any less confident when you're trying to answer an objection, and you've been confident the whole time before that, then, there's a big disconnect there. So, I mean, you don't want to kind of really have to change too much in your, your tonality, your personality, like just be who you are. Right. And even if you have to take a second to think about it, like sometimes people think like, oh, I got to be sharp and, ready to, answer that right away. You don't, right? Like that's not something you have to do. So anyways, just stay confident, be in the right state of mind. And then if you need, here's a good little tidbit. This isn't part of the process, but this is always something good to realize, that when you get an objection and say maybe, you either need more clarification or you just need to think about it more, ask them a question back, right? Like get more clarification. Even if you are clear, ask a clarifying question. So that way they're talking about it a little bit more, you're getting more understanding, and you're kind of like thinking of the best way that you want to respond to that objection, right? All right. So the next one I have down here is you want to come to an agreement with them, right? Like, again, anytime you get an objection, you don't want to start this like adversarial relationship where now it's like, well, they said something, I've got to, beat that, right? Like I've got to overcome that. Like you want to, still create that same connection, that you're on the same page as them, right? So like, oh, I understand what you're saying, right? I'm in agreement with you, or whatever it is. You want to stay in agreement with them, right? Like, hey, I totally get what you're saying. Like, just follow along with them, right? But then the next thing, and this is where you're going to transition. I think a lot of people make this mistake, and sometimes subconsciously I make this mistake too, right? We use that word but. Anytime you say but, we all know that anything you've said before that, it's like out the window, right? It's gone. And the cool thing is I'll say, when you, when you can use just another word that will kind of do the same thing, but it doesn't, in most people's mind, negate what you just said. And it's just using the word and. So if you can just get in your vocabulary, instead of saying but, you say and, I think that it will actually help a lot of these transitions. So basically what that would look like is like, hey, I can appreciate that, and, right? Like that's all it is. I can appreciate that, and, or I hear what you're saying, and, instead of but, right? Like that's all you got to do, right? When you make that little transition. And then what you're going to do is, so there's a few different types of ways that you can say something. The ones that I like to do is kind of relating it to something else that they might have experienced. So like this is the step 4, called the pattern, right? So you've got get excited, getting to the right state of mind. You got agreement is number 2, coming to an agreement with them. Transitioning, right? Which we're going to use the word and not the word but. And then we're going to have some type of like a pattern that you can use to overcome or handle that objection. So the pattern I'm going to use in this case is like trying to say something similar. Like, has there ever been a time, when, and then insert whatever it is, that's similar to what their objection is, and it didn't work out for you, right? Well, hey, this time's exactly like that, and let me explain, right? And then you kind of, explain it, educate them, talk to them about how, something similar happens, and, let them kind of put two and two together, right? Like if their objection is like, I've got a friend that's willing to, cut his commission and do it a lot cheaper, for me. You can say, well, hey, I totally appreciate that. And, has there ever been a time when, you've picked a service, that was the cheapest, and how did that work out for you? You're right. Like, and just ask that question, or, and did that work out, and it didn't work, or whatever, right? Like, you just ask them about their experience with that. Most of the time, right? Like if they're honest, or most of the time people just want to feel like they're playing along with you, right? Like they don't want to, some people, they will be adversarial a little bit, but if they're, an average normal person, they're going to try and like not be too hard, right? So they're gonna be like, yeah, they start to like maybe be in a little bit of agreement with you. And that's when you say like, all right, well, this time's exactly like that. Let me explain, right? And then you can go into the details like, about hiring, the least expensive person. And then, that doesn't work out. Usually, you're unhappy with some level of the service. You might end up costing you more money in the long run, all sorts of ways that you can kind of go into that. And we'll get into the details about these specifically when we get into the actual specific examples that we're getting into. I just want to give you kind of the framework so you guys know right off the bat. But and then the fifth one is agreement, right? So like now you've went through that pattern, you kind of explained it to them. You've brought up a similar scenario or made like a story or something like that, and then you come back around and you say, so you know what? So are we on the same page? Right? Like just, ask them at that point, like, are we on the same page? That's not the close, right? This is just an agreement. Are we on the same page? So then you'd say like, can you see how, more moving forward's the right move? Anything like that would be appropriate at this time when you're just, coming back around and agreeing with them again. And then you'd say, okay, now, if you feel like that was the last objection, or even if you don't, you could at that point, close. And then if it wasn't the last objection, they'll give you another objection, right, that you might have to handle. And then you'd say, okay, well, let's move forward. Here's the listing agreement. Here's the buyer's representation agreement. Here's how we're going to do the contract, right? Like, and that's the close, right? You just go into kind of that assumptive close. And that's the one that I use most often, is just the assumptive close. Like, I handled your objection. Let's go, right? Like, that's what it is for me. Okay, so that was it. That's the process that I use. Before we get into the specifics, Curtis, what did you take from that? Anything I missed? I don't know if you know, he's getting his internet work done, so he might not still be there. All right. Well, any questions from anybody else? What else? Did I miss anything? Are you guys following along? Tim, what's your thing? It said objections, then go to mindset of the client, advice. Yeah, in my experience, objections show there is still some interest and just want more information. Exactly. Love it. All right, what else we got, guys? Feel free to chime in. Let's see if I'm gonna check anything on Facebook here. Objections, yep, there you go. Sylvia says, Grant Cardone says, most of the time an objection is just a complaint. That's right. She put a resource too. I haven't heard this one. The Closer's Survival Guide by Grant Cardone. Not read that one personally, Sylvia, but for any of you guys watching, if y'all want to go get more of this, that seems like Sylvia knows her stuff. So I'm sure that's a good resource for you guys. All right, man. Does everybody just want to get to the, get straight to the objections? I guess they're like ready to go. All right, guys.
Yeah, Kyle, let's go straight to the objections, man. That's the good stuff.
I love it. What's up, Tim? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, man.
There we go. Oh, it's a book. Okay, thanks, Heather. Yeah, you can get it on Audible, she says. Perfect. Look at that. All right, guys. Cool. Well, let's see here. All right. So we kind of talked about this one. We didn't like cover it, but we'll start with this one because this is the one I used earlier, and just says, I've got a friend that can do the same thing for a lower commission, right? Like, we've all heard that. It might be a friend, it might be just another agent, but basically the objection is centered around cutting your commission. Like, that's pretty much what it is, right? Like, they don't want to pay 3%, they want to do 2%, they want to do, whatever it is, 1%, flat fee, comparing it to a flat fee brokerage, right? And so, anyways, with regards to that, we're going to use the same framework, right? Like, the same thing that I said, hey, I can appreciate that, and like in this case, like if they're saying that, like, about the lower commission, and has there ever been a time that, you've selected picked the service that was the cheapest for you, and, how did that work out for you? And just let them answer, right? Most of the time they're going to say, well, yeah, I guess, like they kind of are going to, in their mind, start to agree with you. Like, yeah, it wasn't. And then you're going to say, well, hey, this time's exactly like that. Can I explain? Say, sure. So, here's the thing. You reached out to me because, obviously I've got marketing out there. You heard about me through whatever it is, right? Like if they pulled you on Facebook or Zillow, you saw my reviews, you saw whatever it is, like you want to, kind of rely on your merits, right? Like, or, you knew me because I'm your friend and you trusted in me for a long time, whatever it is, like that they came to you because of, right? Or if you approach them, right, and you kind of reached out to them, hopefully at this point, in this process where you're starting to get objections, you've at least already explained a little bit about, your benefits, right, what you as an agent provide, right? And you're going to say, look, basically what I do as an agent, my track record, I've been an agent for 5 years. I've listed and sold, over 500 properties here in the San Antonio market. My track record does speak for itself. There's all sorts of agents out there that are willing to cut their commission to get your business. Like there's no doubt about that. But what I'll say about that is, I just showed you that I do X, Y, and Z, to get the most amount of money for your property. So basically by you asking me to cut my commission, or potentially if you go with another agent, what you're basically saying is that you don't want me to do all of these things that I'm going to do to market your home, because these all do, cost money. They, take time, whatever it might be. And so realistically at that point, what you're saying is you'd just like to, roll the dice and see if we don't do all this same stuff that I've done for, the 500 homes before, if we're going to get the right amount of buyers or the same amount of buyers that I've done in the past. And, to be honest with you, with my experience, I don't feel that that's the right thing to get you the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time. Would you agree with that? Let them answer, right? Like, so you just kick it back to them. But yeah, I mean, so you basically, it's kind of that takeaway, right? Like if they want to take away commission, you can say, hey, I can do that. But, at the same point, like you're going to miss out and, say, look, they're going to, say if you saved 1%, I think what we can agree is that if I can get more buyers into your home, which I've been proven able to do that, right? When I go into a listing appointment, I'm showing my average list price to sales price ratio, right? So if this does become an objection, I can go back to that. I can say, look, on average, I sell, for 99% of the list price to sales price. The average in San Antonio sells for 97%. So, I can, show you right there, facts, numbers, right? They don't lie, that my process will get you more money on average than the average realtor out there. And I was like, so, 1%, that's not going to really, in the scheme of things, matter much. And so, you just go back and you can use that, right? And then you want to just tie it back in and say, like, so do you, what do you think? Do you agree with that, right? Come back to that agreement. Are we on the same page? Okay. And then if they say, yeah, I guess, that makes sense. Cool. Well, let's go. Here's how we do the listing agreement, and just go right naturally into the next thing. What a lot of times people do is they'll like handle the objection, and then they like dwell on it, right? Like they go back and then they handle it again. And then they like, they almost can't like get off of the objection. And I think that it's so important that like, if you make it a bigger deal than it is, then it's like, they think you almost have something to hide. And it's like, if you handle it in, 30 seconds to a minute, and then move on, right? Unless when you try to close again, they bring something else up. So I think that's kind of how you need to treat that. So that's the first one. All right. So what are y'all's thoughts about that as far as talking about lowering commission? Does anybody handle it a different way? Well, I mean, you can probably handle it many different ways. That's just kind of how I handle it, right? I kind of take that objection and I use kind of the takeaway based on my experience, my process, the things that I do that I've already shown to them, or if I haven't shown them, unfortunately, if you get this objection before you've shown them some of those things that you do differently, then, you almost have to kind of go into it a little bit longer and explain to them, what you do to, to help them get more money, or you do need to go into your track record and show them on numbers, and you should know your numbers, right? That's going to help them, or have your story made up. And I'll tell you guys at the end of this call, I've actually got like an assignment for you guys to do today. One of the things is to list out the 3 to 5 most objections that you hear the most, and then write out your patterns and answers for that, right? Because the thing is, like, what you'll start to realize is if you get the same objections over and over and over, and, it might be more strategic to not only just know how to handle that objections, but actually how to like position yourself in the listing appointment or in that buyer's appointment to where you're starting to like touch on those things earlier, so you don't even necessarily get those objections. Or when you do, it's like, okay, well, now I tie back into what I've already said, right? Like sometimes you have to set yourself up to handle that objection down the road. So that would be another little tip that I'll make for you guys. And if you can, again, just think about it. Like all this stuff just takes thinking about it. It's nothing that's like rocket science. It's just, thinking about this stuff more strategically ahead of time. That way, when it actually comes to you, you're not like, trying to do it on your feet. Okay.
Hey, Kyle, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Hey, buddy. What if you don't have, like, say on the listing side, that's like real common objection is to, can you, cut your commission to 1.5%? Like, you using your credibility, I'll be where you are one day, but let's just say if I don't have the credibility that you do, like, what are some, tips that you would recommend, to go to handle those objections to that 1.5%, or anybody on this call, I guess, as well?
Yeah. Well, I would ask Tim, in that case, I think everybody on this call, whether you're new or not, needs to have 3 things that make you unique, right? Like you'd need to start there, like, and because again, you can be new in the business, but like, what about Tim Power makes you unique, right? Like, just as your personality traits or characteristics, like what would you say about yourself, Tim, that you do as a person? Even just, it doesn't have to be real estate, right? But like, what are some of your characteristics that you feel are strong about yourself?
Persistence, and good service. I'm going to give the best service. I'm not going to give up on anything. Just the customer service piece is like, I'm, taking in prior business to this business has really helped me. So like, that's,
okay,
right there.
And then maybe think also too of like, what's like one of your major successes that you've had in life? Doesn't have to be real estate, right? Like what's something that you've done that you were successful at in your life, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess, goodness.
I'm putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, you are kind of putting me on the spot, man. I'm usually a little quicker than this, but I would just say, like, taking in like the sales side of it and, connections with people, connections with agents, like in the listing side of it.
Well, what I was getting to, Tim, because I know your background, right? I know that you were, big timer over there at Discount Tire, right? Like, and you were, you owned a branch or a store, right?
Yeah, I was in charge of like, 30, 40 employees.
Right.
Doing the hiring, the firing, the teaching, the training, all that good stuff.
And did you ever get any awards or anything like that from being in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Customer service, anything like that?
We hit the $750,000 a month sales award, so that's pretty big.
All right. Well, the reason why I'm going down this path is, again, I think that everybody's got to think a little bit more, right, about in their life, things that they've done. Doesn't even have to be real estate. If you're a new agent, you got to get creative, right? And so like what you would do, because this has got to come off like genuine, right? There's not something I'm going to tell you guys on this call that I think is the right thing for everybody to say that's a new agent. I think what you need to say as a new agent has to be genuine to you, right? If you're really going to truly handle this objection, it's got to be, genuine to you, and it's got to be using your life, right? So like, hey, totally get what you're saying. Even though I'm new in real estate, one of the things that I think that, the people that I've always served have said about me is that, I don't ever quit. I never give up. I always ensure that, your needs are met. to the highest level. In fact, when I was, the store manager of Discount Tire, I was responsible for, 35 employees, and, we accomplished, a goal that less than 1% of the stores ever accomplished, across the nation, or whatever, right? Like for customer satisfaction, or for, for our sales, or whatever it was, right? Like, and, I was, played a, key role into that. And so like you would use your background and say that, right? And like use your experience in that and say, and I'm just, taking what I've learned and now I'm applying it into real estate, which I've got great mentors. I've got a great team helping me. So, all of the things that you are talking about that you're curious, or, that you're questioning is, things that I'm going to make sure, to take care of 100% for you, as best as I know how. So like, that's, I think, the record you got to, or the approach you have to take is like, think about this right now when we get off this call. And if people on this call don't have what makes you unique, I think that's also a whole nother like sales, call thing that, we need to do, right? Like, is like, talk about like, what are the different things that make you unique? Because if nothing makes you unique, it's hard to answer objections. It's hard to sell anything, right? Like, you've got to have what makes you unique. And then when you get an objection, you got to go back to those things that make you unique and, kind of like rest on that, right? Like, and go back to it and say like, well, you could use the same objection, right? That, that I just talked about, right? Like when even if you're new, right? Like there's nothing that precludes you from like having a written out marketing plan, like what you're going to bring to the table to market that person's houses. Professional photos. I'm going to do, Facebook ads. I'm going to do an open house. I'm going to do, I'm going to put a sign in the yard that has, a text rider on it. Like, think of every little piece of things that you do to the business. I'm going to post your house in a private group on Facebook that has 3,000 agents, that just talk about kind of like, listings and things like that here in San Antonio, right? Like whatever it might be that makes you unique. And that's where I think it's an important practice to do. That way, again, you can kind of go back to that list and say like, hey, I can, I could take away things, but at the same point, like we're going to have to, take away, all of the stuff that we're doing on the marketing plan. And I'll tell you from my experience, and whether that's selling one home, no homes, or like, 100 homes, just say from my experience, right? Like, because again, you can have experience talking to agents. You had to get licensed, right? Like you had to go out and get your real estate license. That's experience. Most people don't know that, right? Like the average salesperson or the average seller, you are licensed, right? And rely on that. If you've got to use that, like, hey, I got my license. Like that's a big thing, right? Like, so whatever it is, you just got to be creative, be unique about it, be true to yourself, and rely on that. So that would be the way that I would kind of answer that, Tim.
That was very helpful, Kyle. It was awesome. Thank you, dude.
Cool. All right. So next one, guys. And this would be like if they have a specific number that they wanted to sell their home for, right? Like, so like maybe they say to you, Tim, you don't have to respond. I'm going to use your name though. In this, I'm going to say like, well, Tim, I mean, all that sounds really great and all, but man, we really need to sell this for $300,000, or we really need to net $40,000 on this house, right? Like you're going to hear that pretty often, right? Like a pricing objection. And this is where, hopefully at this point too, you've went through the comps with them, right? And you've kind of, showed them, hey, like here's what has sold in the last 6 months. Here's what has, canceled in the last 6 months. Here's what is, for sale currently, right? And you just say to them, like, I'll kind of say like, hey, I'd love to get you $100,000 more for your home, but unfortunately I'm not buying it, right? Somebody out there in the market is going to buy it. And my job is to just market and expose your home to the highest number of quality buyers out there and agents, right? So that way we get the most buzz around your house and highest offer, right? The highest price. But here's the thing I would ask you, Tim, like when you're going to go buy a house, right? You're going to look at all the sold prices as well. And are you going to tell the person that you're buying their house from that, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you $20,000 more than all the other houses that sold? And Tim's probably going to say, well, no, like I want to get, the best price, right? Like you're not just going to willingly give people more money than what something is worth, right? And so that's when you have to say to them like, hey, like you know, people are going to do the same thing, right? Every buyer out there is thinking the same way. Like they want to get the best price that they possibly can. And based on the numbers that I've shown you, Tim, what in here, do you see that would allow us to sell it for that price, right? And I think if you put it back on them, right, to kind of answer that question, like, and you've shown them all that, they don't have a leg to stand on. They really don't. I mean, you have to use the numbers when it comes to pricing, and you have to say like, look, this is just, I understand that that's what you want to get, but unfortunately, guys, nobody is going to just willingly pay more for more for your house than what it's worth. And there's no numbers in here that show me that anyone is going to be willing to, pay for that much, no matter how nice your home is, no matter, any of this kind of stuff. We've factored all of that in, and we're still getting to this price, right? And that's where you want to kind of like push back and get on your price, ask them, and say like, out of what you've seen, what makes, you confident that we would be able to sell your house for that? And then because you want to get what's in their mind, like you want to hear what they're thinking, like make them say like, well, I see this house here, it sold for this much. And, and I think my house is worth $20,000 more. Okay, perfect. When you get that response, like you don't want to be, again, like adversarial. You want to, again, this is just something that you're educating. You're trying to like work through this with the person and explain to them. And you say, well, yeah, okay, look, I get that. Let's really dive into this home and let's look, let's see why we think that we could get 20,000 more. Yes, you might have a covered patio, but this one had a 3-car garage, right? Like, and you're not accounting for that. Or, and then you got to kind of like go back and forth and really get to where it was that you understood when you went there originally, kind of thinking what that house would be worth. So that's kind of how you handle that objection as far as like a specific number that they want to sell the house for. It's, again, coming back to education. It's kind of rolling through the numbers and just kind of talking to them again about, market value, what it means. I think sometimes you have to like go back into the education about how to potentially get them the best offer and say, look, I mean, here's the thing, we can price your house 3 ways. That's all it is, right? We can price it above market value. We can price it at market value, and we can price it below market value. I'll be honest, I've had the best experience, quite honestly, pricing something below market value. And, in this market where it's a seller's market, when you price something below market value, typically what happens is you create a frenzy and you get a ton of people interested, and you end up creating a bidding. And you say like, you almost like ask them like, I'm going to create a bidding. And then you say like, what is it that you create a bidding? And they say bidding war, right? Because everybody's heard of bidding war. And basically, yeah, a bidding war. And when you get a bidding war, you're going to get, higher offers. You're going to find the most qualified buyers for it. Because what ends up happening is you might get all sorts of offers. Like, let's compare it to an auction, right? Like when they start an auction, if you go on eBay, do they start it above the price and come down? Or do they start it below the price and go up? It's because they, and that's how they find it, because all the earlier people that bid on it early, they all drop off. And then you end up winding up with 2 or 3 people that are most qualified, that most want the house, and that are going to be willing to pay the most amount of money for it. If we price it too high, then we're going to be constantly chasing the market, which in the long term ends up costing you more money and taking more time, right? And so that would be the idea that we don't want to take. The two strategies that I would say would be the only strategies we should be looking at is the one where we either price it at market value, which if that's all that you're comfortable with, hey, we can do that, or pricing it below market value. The great thing is, Mr. and Miss Seller, is even if we price it below market value, you don't have to accept any offers, right? Like we can price it below market value, and even if somebody writes it for what we're asking, you don't have to accept that offer. Okay, we're just, again, putting in, what we think is fair. And then we're going to find out pretty quickly based upon all of the facts at that point, even if we priced it below market value, we're going to see what transpires over the next week or 2. And then we can make an informed decision with a lot of data points or a lot of, people that might be interested, versus having to make a decision when we price it above the market and having no data, because we don't know, because nobody was even really looking at it to begin with because it was too high priced. So, that's kind of the approach you can take, and then again, get the acknowledgement, get the agreement at the end, tie that in. Are we on the same page, right? Can you see how this is the right decision moving forward? Like that's where you want to tie that back in. All right. We good on that one? Any questions? All right. Looks good. You know what I did? I had one this weekend. Norma, what'd you do? I want to hear it.
Hi, Kyle.
Hey.
Yes, I had an old client from maybe last year. He's like an investor. He has houses and stuff. So he had me go to one of his other listings, and he kind of wanted to compare our realtors to the iBuyers at that 4.5%. So what I did, I was like, okay, let's see what I can do for you. I kind of investigated. What did he know about it? Well, he didn't know anything. All he knew is I want a professional, and I want. He was just telling me I want one. I said okay. So I gave him an option as well. I told him okay. I did what you did. The three strategies, above, medium, and low. I took him a whole thing. I said, well, why do you think I should be getting paid less? He goes, well, I want you to make the 1.5%, and I want to put it out there for 3%. And I said, no, wait a minute. I said, and I had that client relationship with him, so I can talk to him that way. So I started playing around with him. I said, well, you know what? You want me to work this much, but you just want to give me 1.5%. And he says, Norma, I'm going to get you to do all my other properties. I said, okay, you got a deal. Let's do this. I'll work with you. I'll do this and this. And he goes, okay. So this past weekend, then I said, okay, so for 2 days, I sent him information about iBuyers. I got a friend of mine that I was talking to her about it. She says, Norma, I'm going to send you an offer that was iBuyers where they had to pay up to, he thought that he was only going to pay the 1.5% to them, or the 4.5%. Well, after I educate him on the iBuyers and how this much is just up front, but yet now you're going to have to pay $17,000. It's not just going to be the 4.5% you're paying to him. After he saw the whole picture, then he says, okay, he wanted me to work harder. I said, you know what? I'm willing to. I'll hustle. I don't care. So I went out there and I said, okay, well, you know what? We'll do it at the 5%. He goes, but I said, looked for him. I told him, you know what? We'll do it at this much. But he goes, I got him to go all the way up to 5%. And he goes, I'll do it for this much for 60 days, Norma. Show me what you can do in 60 days. And I said, fine. I said, and I looked at the market, and the market houses were selling like within under 30 days. I said, I can do it. And it's under 30 days. So I did. And then after he goes, I go, okay, to 30 days. He goes, and after 60 days, if you don't sell it, we'll drop down to 4%. I said, that's 4.5%. I said, it's the deal. Let's do it. So
I love that.
So I did. And then, he goes, well, then after that, we'll do it for 30 more days. So I sent him little speculations. After 60 days, it's 5. After that, we went down to 4.5%. So that means I got to hustle. I got to do this just to get it sold for that much.
I love it. I love it.
And then check this out. So long story short, I got a call the next morning. Can we see the house? Yes. What time? And because I jumped at it so fast, he says, can you meet me in 30 minutes? I said, I'm there in 30. So I went out there, met him in 30. I just got an email, a text this morning. He says, Norma, we want the house. I haven't even.
There it is.
So I said, good. So I haven't told the seller yet. I'm still doing contract with him because he wanted me to send everything. I'm going to have the photographer go out there today, but I might just have to cancel that because I won't need that. So
I love it.
Oh my God, I'm just overwhelmed this morning because I got to do both sides now.
I love it. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Then he told me, well, I need a house for my daughter. The seller told me that. I said, good. Yeah. So I sent him some houses last night. We're going to go at 11 this morning, but they had multiple offers on there. I said, you know what? They had multiple offers on that house. So for a reason, it was listed last month, 179, came down to 149. There is something fishy going there. Let me check into it. I did. I said, you know what? Foundation damage and roof damage. No, we don't want that. It's just problems.
Wow.
Houses, so
wow. Well, Norma, thanks for sharing. That's awesome. That's actually a great thing to point out too, guys, as far as using some leverage, for, a potential objection handling. If you think of it as the days on market, I think is an important one, especially, because the iBuyer craze is kind of crazy right now. And, a lot of people, that is almost another objection that we could talk about. And in fact, maybe we will just talk about it right now. Is I think, some people, they don't like the uncertainty of, having to list their house for 6 months or whatever right now. But the thing is, we all know, especially for the price that the iBuyers are willing to pay for their home, when it comes down to all the fees and everything that, gets netted out, if we were to list the house for that price, chances are we're going to sell the darn thing too, right? Like we all know that. Like I talked to somebody the other day and they were saying that I think an iBuyer, it was Open Door or someone bought the house for like I think it was 267 minus fees. That was their offer, 267 minus fees. And, basically, so the seller probably netted less than, in the 250s or so. And they listed that house, Open Door did, I think it was like 5 weeks later. Of course, the seller was watching it, right? Like they wanted to see what happened. Open Door listed it like 5 weeks later and they sold it for $295,000. And so it's like and they just were like, it was like a sick to this, stomach feeling that they had when they had seen how much money they left on the table just because they wanted the convenience. And so like, use stories when you're kind of overcoming objections. Like when we're talking about these iBuyers and you want to say like, hey, here's the thing. Like if you're worried that this is going to drag on for 6 months, let's do this. I'll list it for 30 days. Do a 30-day listing agreement with me. We know as listing agents that, hey, if we price that house right, and we get it somewhat staged and clean where it's looking decent, right? And maybe that means you've got to pay, a make-ready crew $500 to go in there. It's worth it as the listing agreement. If it's the right listing, right? If it's a $300,000 listing or whatever, and you're going to make $9,000 on it, go in there and invest, right? It's almost, it is like a gamble, right? But it's a worthwhile gamble if you know what you're doing and say, hey guys, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pay to have somebody come in there and do a make ready on your house. They're going to clean it. They're going to touch up, do all that kind of stuff. All I need you to do is maybe get a few extra things out of your house, right? Like maybe they got too much stuff in there. That's all that I need you to do. And we're going to list it for 30 days. And if I can't get you more than what, this iBuyer is saying they're going to give you, then, go ahead and go take that offer. And you're risking maybe $500 or whatever it might be. Plus if you're going to get, pictures, which I highly recommend you get professional pictures, right? You might be risking $600-700, but that if you do that, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to sell it for more than what that iBuyer was going to give them when they net out all of the fees. And it's important too that the sellers, you educate them and let them know, hey, they're going to give you an offer price, but just realize that's not the net number. Make sure you know what the fees are in addition to that. Okay. Because a lot of times they try and say like, oh, we're cutting out the realtors, 6%. Yeah, they're cutting out our 6%, but they're also charging their own, percentage or whatever it is, right, for their, their fees. So anyways, cool. All right. So let's move on to the next one here. Hey, Norma, let's save it to the end because I got to get through some more of these. Okay. All right. So let's go to, we're not ready to pull the trigger yet. Right. So that's another objection that you hear sometimes. Right. And this could be on the listing side. It could be on the buyer side. Like maybe the buyers are getting cold feet and maybe they just don't want to buy anymore. Like, they need a house, but maybe they don't need it. Right. Like they, are in a situation where they can, go month to month. They are, can renew their lease and they thought about buying a house, but now they don't want to. Or you're with a listing, somebody that wants to list their house, but maybe they decide all of a sudden that they don't want to list their house during the holidays, right? Like we're going to be coming up to the holidays, eventually, which is kind of crazy. We're already in August. And so, pretty soon we're going to start getting, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And you're going to hear people that say like, well, I'd like to wait until January, right? So those are like, so this is just a waiting objection. So here's how I start that out, right? I say, oh, hey, I totally get that, on the same page as you. Whatever, let me start by saying whatever you want to do is totally fine by me. I'm your real estate agent. I'm here to help you, whether it's today or, a few months from now or a year from now, right? Like that's what I want you to know. But let me just tell you a couple facts, right? And this is where you maybe kind of, you don't say but. See how I told you, you say, and let me just tell you a couple facts, right? Like just a quick little change of your voice there. And let me just tell you a couple facts. In the fourth quarter, right, the amount of homes that are listed for sale drop drastically. A lot of the sellers are thinking the exact same thing as you, that they don't want to have their house listed. And what ends up happening on January and even into the springtime is the amount of homes that are for sale just drastically rise and say, but now the buyer demand is going to stay there. There's people that get moved all the time. Yes, it might not be quite as high as the summer, but there's still quite a bit of demand. in, the fall months and the winter months. And so the demand only drops slightly, but the amount of homes that are on the market drops drastically. And so, in that scenario, don't you think that your home would stand out to more people than when you list it with a lot of other homes that are coming on at the same exact time? They're going to say, yeah, probably so, right? Like, let them acknowledge, agree, follow along with you. And then you say, and here's the thing is, I totally get it that, you might not want to be inconvenienced and moving or whatever through the holiday season. But again, you don't have to accept any offer that doesn't make sense for you. And so what we could do, because again, there's going to be maybe more demand for your house when there's less homes on there, we might have a little bit more ability to structure the deal in a way that makes sense for you. And what I mean by that is, maybe we can get a lease back to where, we'll sell the house during the season, but then they'll lease the house back to you for, 30 days, 40 days to at least bypass, Christmas. So you can stay in your house until January 3rd or whatever, right? Like we can try and do something more like that will work for your schedule. Right. And so and then, how does that sound for you? Sounds great. Okay, cool. And then again, if it doesn't work out, then you don't have to sell. You don't have to take the offer. Right. And so you can kind of take that approach with people and just see if that kind of creates a little bit of just, not trust, but just, kind of puts their guard a little bit less there to know that they're in charge, they're in power to not have to take any offer and be inconvenienced. But we all know that once we get to that point where we get an offer and, money talks, right? Like, I mean, in what was inconvenient, a month or so ago, just because it would be nice to list in January, when they get that physical offer and they're like, hey, this is, the next step, this puts us to that next chapter, they're willing, probably at that point, a little bit more willing to do whatever it is because it's real versus when you're just talking about something in the beginning. And so that objection, you kind of handle it by just kind of like delaying it, right? Like you still might have to have that conversation because maybe the buyer's not willing to do a lease back, when it's all said and done. Like maybe they need to be in by Christmas time, right? But at least now you got an offer in the hand. You can go to the seller and say like, hey, again, you still don't have to take this, but this is a great offer. This does put you one step closer to whatever it is that desired outcome you want is, now that may spur them to just do it, right? Versus, in the beginning when they didn't want to because they thought there was a lot of other options. So I think you have a little bit better chance at that point. So, all right, number 4, because we're running short on time, we've got 8 minutes. You're going to hear this too. When you go to like a listing agreement or maybe even a buyer consultation, sometimes I don't think so much on the buyer consultations, but you're going to hear like, hey, Kyle, you're a great agent, but you know what? I've promised to interview 2 more agents, right? Or I've promised I've got to, talk to 1 more agent, before that, or before we make a decision. Like you're probably going to hear that one, right? The way that I kind of handle that, right, is, I ask them first, I say, well, was that a promise to yourself or was that a promise to the other person, right? To the other agent. And, depending on what they say, you're going to kind of tailor your response, right? You want to find out, or they don't even have to say promise, right? But, I agreed to talk or whatever, like just say like, did you agree, was that an agreement you made with yourself or was that an agreement you made with the other person? And then you would just, kind of go into and ask them, well, was there anything specifically that you're looking for that would be different that you're looking for in that other agent, right? Like basically trying to find out like, hey, Mr. and Ms. Seller, I totally understand that, but let me ask you just so I know, is there anything different that you're looking for in that agent that, I didn't cover or I didn't do, right? Like try and find out like, where are the holes? Like what else are they looking for? And if they're like, well, no, not really. Then I think that's the perfect, point you want to get to. And most of the time I would say they probably say that, right? Like that's what I usually hear most often when I kind of come back with that. And then I say, well, so if that's the case, why do you want to, waste more time, for yourself and potentially for that other agent if you've already found the agent that, is going to do everything that you're looking for? Let them answer that question, right? Like you got it. Sometimes with these objection handling, silence is the key, right? You just be quiet. You let them answer it. Let them kind of like roll through it in their mind and say, and sometimes like if they even come back and they say something, right, I'll say, well, I I can't, I can't let you off the hook, but I can let them off the hook. Would it be easier for you if, if we ended up agreeing that, hey, we're going to work together today, for me to, call up, this agent, right? Like, whoever it is that you were supposed to meet with, and just let them know out of professional courtesy that, we've decided to work together, and, give them maybe first crack to bring a buyer by or something like that. So that way, hey, you're, still, giving them, a way out. And most of the time, what's funny is when you then challenge almost them, and like, it sounds like you're being helpful, right? Like you're kind of getting them to where they don't have to make that call. But most of the time, the seller, they almost don't want to appear or seem weak, right? So they'll say, oh, well, you know what? No. Like, I don't mind calling the person and letting them know, right? And then boom, okay, well, all right, perfect. So now you're already at that spot where they're ready to use you. And they've made it the decision in their mind that they're going to handle everything else with the other agent, right? Like that's kind of a good like trick that you can almost use to just like make it seem like, and maybe they will say, yeah, please, get me off the hook or whatever with them. And if that's the case, hey, you just make the call like, hey, Susie, I know that you had an appointment with this, with this seller. We had a great conversation today, and they, ultimately just decided they wanted to, use me as their agent at a professional courtesy. I just wanted to give you that heads up because I know you're supposed to meet with them later this week. But, I will be, in contact with you if, once we get the property listed, and if there's any way we can work together, as you on the buyer side or whatever, be happy to do that with you. Right. So that way you're just being professional. You as an agent don't even have to do that. And so, I mean, maybe that listing agent or that potential listing agent would have been upset, but there's nothing that you could have done differently, right? Like you got the listing agreement and now you're trying to make nice with it. So I think that's kind of a good way that you can kind of handle that scenario. All right. The last one, I don't know if anybody deals with expired listings. I've done a few expired listings in my time. This is one that I would say, comes up a lot when you're doing expired listings. And then we'll wrap up the call. But a lot of times if I would say the vast majority, over 90% of the time when a listing expires, it's usually because the price was not set properly. There's all things that, also factor in, like, of course, the condition of the property, the marketing of the home, like if the photos weren't nice or something like that. But the majority of the time, it's usually because the property is not listed at the right price. And even if like the home wasn't in the best condition, that's still kind of a pricing thing, right? Like, because you should have priced that home for the condition that it's in. And so anyways, most of the time it's pricing. And so when you go and talk to an expired listing seller, most of the time, and you can kind of get them to agree that, hey, it was pricing, you're going to get the objection sometimes that they're going to say, well, okay, hey, I totally get it. The pricing was wrong, but you know what, the agent that we used beforehand, because we've already got a relationship with them, we already, know who they are. We're going to give it back to that agent. We're just going to price it right this time. Right? Like that's sometimes you'll hear that. It's kind of crazy, right? Like I'm sure people probably watching this are like, why would anybody do that? And it's exactly that. Like that's kind of the almost the script that I use with people. I say, well, here, let me just, ask you this. I say like, if you, were to go to a doctor and get, diagnosed, and they diagnosed you wrong, and now you're coming to a different doctor who tells you exactly what that, the right diagnosis is, would you really go back to the doctor that diagnosed you wrong in the first place? And, most people are saying, well, no. He said, well, this is, and it's again, using the same situation. Well, this is the same, kind of situation here, basically not saying anything bad about that agent, but whatever the situation was that caused them to price the home incorrectly in the first place, whether they just agreed to whatever price you were telling them you wanted, and that's why they priced it out that, or if they just didn't know, it probably doesn't benefit you to go back to that same agent and, go and now at this point, use their expertise or guidance. Like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because here's the thing, if they just use the price that, the thing about that is, what do you think happens when they finally do get an offer, right? Like, how willing are they going to be to make sure that, you get the most amount of money from that offer? And because you got to realize pricing it and marketing the property is only one half of the equation. It's literally that's step one. The whole other 50% of that is the back end, right? Like we call and this is where I say, I call pricing and marketing kind of the front end. And then I call working the deal the back end. That's once you get an offer, that's once you get, inspections and have to, work through the inspections and, what items you're going to fix and not fix. When you get appraisals and you have to make sure that, you're going out there to, meet the appraiser to make sure that your house appraises for the full value. Like, you're talking with them, like all these things all go on even after you get the deal. And so like really what you're just talking about is just one part of it. And I don't know that, if they didn't, start with that part right in the first place, how confident are you that they're going to get it all the way right throughout the whole process? And so then you just, again, so do you agree? Like, can you see how that would be important to you? And you wrap that up. Cool. Well, that's it. That's what I got, guys, for these 5 objections. It is 10 o'clock. Let me see here. Yeah. So your action items that you can take away from this, go and list the 3 to 5 objections that you hear the most, right? Write out patterns and answers to those objections, and then read and memorize those over and over and over, right? Like bring them to a future call, or message me if you've got an objection, you just don't even know how to answer it. Like I would love to hear some of the objections that you're getting that we didn't get a chance to cover on this call. But guys, we'll run a little bit over. Just want to see what else did I miss? Did anybody hear anything or want me to expand on anything? Because we're going over, but I've got a few more minutes before I got to jump. Feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to type it in the chat. I'm looking at Facebook comments right now, going through all these. You're welcome, Melanie. Glad you jumped on. Yeah, yeah, I love it, Jace. Ask for 6 if you can sell it in 10 days. There you go. That's right. Guys, I'll tell you, I mean, it's one of those things. You want to be on the same page with the seller, right? Like put yourselves in their shoes and help them be in your shoes, right? Like if you can kind of align y'all's interests, on any kind of objection, I think that you're going to be better off, right? Like if they make a valid point, like be honest, like, hey, that's a great point. Like, hey, but here's what I believe in. Like, I believe I'm going to sell your home in 10 days, in 30 days. And I'm willing to take a risk with you, just like you're willing to take a risk with me, if you're willing to take a risk with me, right? Like, I think if somebody like a seller sees that kind of transparency, they're going to be more apt to using you. It's kind of like literally like, my wife and I, we just bought a house. This house we're in now, we just sold it. We're buying a new house. The house we were going to buy, it was a hot house, that just had come on the market. We were contingent because we hadn't sold this house yet. And so we tried making a contingent offer and they didn't take it, right? They were like, well, we really don't want to, take a contingency. And I said, well, hey, I totally get that. It was almost like handling an objection in an offer form. And I said, well, what we'll do, we're going to take the risk with your seller. We'll drop our contingency because I'm confident that we'll sell our house. We'll put our earnest money stake, which, is a decent amount of earnest money. And I said, because we're that confident. And so let's hear that. So basically we did that. We went back with no contingency and got the deal done, and then put our house up for sale, got our house sold just like we knew we would. So now everything is working out just right. But Curtis, what do you say? I hear that CFIT. Oh, the one I hear the most is we're
not ready yet.
Oh yeah. Yep. We covered that one. Love it. We're not ready yet. Getting ready is one of the hardest things to do. What will life look like when the time is right to sell? I like that. That's a good question, Curtis. A lot of this stuff, guys, again, sometimes it's an actual objection. You got to handle it. Sometimes it's just, a concern or a comment or whatever. And you just need to like question it more. That's a big one. So good stuff. All right. What else, guys? Anything else? Curtis, did you have anything to share?
Probably nothing that you didn't cover, man. I jumped on right at the end, but.
Are you on your blazing fast internet yet?
250 up and down right now. I don't have the hard wire in yet, but at least the speed's up on the wireless.
Okay. Well, good deal. Well, guys, hey, thanks all so much for jumping in and watching this. If you missed this, or if you missed any of our past Monday masterminds and want to catch up, you can go over to my Patreon page, just at patreon.com/Kyle Handy. And I think I've got now getting close to about 50 prior episodes on there for the Monday mastermind. And then we also do the Tuesday mastermind, and record those and put them on there as well. But the Tuesday one is more for like team building, building your EXP, real estate, agent attraction business. And that's what Tuesdays is all about. But I've got all those recorded as well. And so when you go onto the Patreon page, you can either join just the sales tier, where you're going to get all the sales, the Monday masterminds recorded. You can join just the Tuesday one and get all the agent attraction ones, where you can go get those ones that are recorded, or you can join both Monday and Tuesday and get access to all of them. So I always appreciate all of you that have supported. I think we're up to, I don't know, close to over 30 patrons, which is amazing to me because we just started this like a month and a half ago. So I really, really appreciate your support. If there's anything that I can ever do, I'm always one for good feedback. So feel free to message me. Let me know, what you like, what I could do better. Happy to always kind of also do different topics that you guys think are important. So cool. Well, guys, I hope everyone has an amazing week, and we will see you back on the Monday call next Monday morning. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.